I really don't want to put any more unessential money into this hospital. So rest assured, our nurses, our healthcare professionals, our doctors, you are going to be working in an environment that's conducive to providing quality healthcare.
I'm Felix Camacho, and I approve this message.
Hafide, I moved to Guam 23 years ago, living paycheck to paycheck just to make ends meet. Through hard work, I was able to build small businesses, not just to sustain my family, but also to provide job opportunities for our island. But I want more for Guahan. I will use my experience to strengthen our economy by promoting affordable housing, food sustainability, and foster growth for all businesses. Together, we can make Guahan stronger from within and set new standards for our island. I'm Bishop Mendiola, and I approve this message.
Good evening and welcome to our studios here on the 7th floor of the DNA building in Hagåtña, Guam. I'm Troy Torres, and tonight we have a special investigative report, the first in a series of a report that we have been compiling for months now regarding relationship between Governor Leon Guerrero and the Bank of Guam as the government of Guam's main banker. When we come back, we'll bring you the first part of this report. Stick with us.
Half a day. My name is Marianne Mana Silva Tyron, and I'm running for a seat in the 37th Guam Legislature. You might remember me from my media days, as I spent over 20 years covering news here on Guam. More recently, I served as a senator in the 31st Guam Legislature and as the deputy administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. I've always been an advocate for businesses and for building a strong economy for our island, and over the years have worked to create new laws that help to increase business activity and develop new industries on Guam. I've also created legislation that helped to improve access to government services. If elected to serve again, I will continue to focus on improving the economy because I believe that building a strong economy will allow us to better address critical needs in public safety, healthcare, and education. This general election, I ask that you give me one of your votes. I'm Marianne Mana Silva Tyron, and I'm number 12 on the Republican side of the ballot.
The Camacho Ada campaign asks all our supporters to vote on the Republican side of the ballot on Election Day. From our friends Felix Camacho and Tony Ada for governor and lieutenant governor, Jim Moylan for delegate to the U.S. Congress, and our 15 candidates for the Guam legislature. Vote Republican from the top to the bottom. It all begins with you. You have to get involved with the process. That's how elections are won.
I'm Felix Camacho. And I'm Tony Ada. And we approve this message.
Half a day. I'm Tom Fisher. Here's the harsh reality. A trip to the grocery store for the basics, eggs, bag of rice, butter, can of Spam, milk, costs almost $30, and that's just 5 items. The cost of living continues to grow, but the money doesn't. We need to roll back the business privilege tax to reduce Guam's cost of living, and I will make that happen.
Vote Thomas Fisher for senator. If you want different, vote different.
I'm Tom Fisher, and I approve this message.
I am Vera Charlotte Mendiola, and I am voting for Joe.
I am Danny Blas. I am voting for Joe.
I am Sarah Babasa Charlotte Taitano, and I am voting for Joe.
My name is John Ray Taitano, and I'm voting for Joe.
I am Emily Caceres, and I'm voting for Joe.
Ako po si Junel Lombero. Iboto po natin si Joe.
My name is Anthony James Pasio Wolford, and I am voting for Joe.
I am Edith Blas, and I'm voting for Joe.
I'm Richard San Nicolas, and I'm voting for Joe.
The right way.
Hafa Day, dear people of Guam. My name is Peter Santos, and I am running as a write-in candidate for the Attorney General of Guam. For many reasons, crime, especially violent crime, is at an all-time high on Guam. This crisis is mostly due to a lack of competent prosecution. There are just 2 prosecutors who are qualified to handle serious cases. This dire situation was totally avoidable, but Leon Camacho is seriously out of touch with reality. Just like under Douglas Moylan, highly qualified prosecutors fled from Leon. Guam doesn't need to choose the lesser of 2 evils between Leon and Doug this election. I have 30 years of public service as a GPD officer, Army JAG, prosecutor, magistrate, and defense attorney. I am the right man to fix what Levin and Doug has broken. Please write in Peter Santos for Attorney General of Guam in this election. Thank you, si Diyos maasi, maraming salamat, and kiliso.
Terong ani kami resau mar me reilumar ngang ursemiam lino meta olopai. Imusan tangar malulu ngani kami masal ngani kami babu fiti le iti Selena Roberto Babauta bobotolong boye nice Congress nomor nyan balad nge ruo automatically nomor nyan balad nge ruo melan November walu lan maram musik kemutingan au sihi uri ululu nyan ngang melan House of Representative eseb mesah ehibura ehiwana charmalian wikita ngairala mikagat dengan egis meas government ebalsenir me eno precinct 2 ebalam benar alnger sakna we esabior beferno melan fanu kafanwas wanwanete ehi lokametaka ekeira boba mala beferno melan meas government Awyas hero balan fanu kafanwas bali ya hero atau tabuye yang musenegi me bato tabuye busiu atau lenge Selena Roberto Babauta nomor ruo lanyan balad bisi atau lenge webono boye as senator lan election sikkim matengene lan November Giliso ngani kami resa omar merero mar. Giliso.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for this special report. The public health emergency has been bad for business, shuttering shops, laying off employees, reducing hours, and causing greater homelessness and poverty. But for the bank the governor owns, business has been booming. Kandit has undertaken an extensive investigation into whether the governor deliberately caused this to happen. After all, it is her signature that extends the public health emergency every 30 days, one that is now nearly 3 years in the making. It is possible the bank that Governor Leon Guerrero owns would be making money from her decision to leave some $300 million in Federal American Rescue Plan Act money there, according to information from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, under whose jurisdiction the Bank of Guam falls. And even if the bank is not making money off those deposits now, nothing stops that from changing after the election. The Bank of Guam is the government of Guam's main banker. The bank was selected through the procurement process under the previous administration. A new procurement process is scheduled to occur next year. As GovGuam's banker, billions of dollars in local and federal cash flow in and out of the bank annually. According to her budget director, Lester Carlson Jr., the governor and the bank took deliberate action to avoid even the appearance of impropriety in the handling of federal funds. Documented evidence scattered throughout the bank's filings with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the FDIC, however, show that as island residents have suffered tremendously throughout the pandemic, the governor's bank has improved its financial position substantially. Kandit contacted the Federal Reserve to get clarity on the issues. Quote, as the bank makes more loans, it has to keep more money on reserve, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco's Marshall Ekblad told Kandit as a general statement that does not specify any bank under the San Francisco Federal Reserve's jurisdiction. Quote, the Fed does pay interest on those reserves, end quote. The average total assets of the Bank of Guam, according to its September 30, 2021 filing to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was more than $2.9 billion, according to the bank's report filed 2 years earlier. Bank of Guam's assets were a little more than $1.9 billion before the pandemic began, indicating the bank's assets grew by $1 billion throughout the public health emergency. These numbers come directly from the bank's quarterly consolidated reports of condition and income for a bank with domestic and foreign offices to the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, or FFIEC, under the FDIC. A senior banker from another local bank who spoke to Kandit on condition of anonymity said part of that increase may be from surge deposits. This banker explained that for most banks throughout the country during the pandemic, people, and especially corporations, became conservative with spending and kept more money in their banks during the rainy day that has been the pandemic. By comparison, Bank of Guam's assets grew by about $400 million during the 4-year period preceding Ms. Leon Guerrero's term as governor. This was during the economic boom of the second half of the Calvo administration, when the bank's total assets grew from about $1.5 billion to north of $1.8 billion. Despite the dramatic increase in the bank's assets and earnings, Bank of Guam was not issuing more loans during the pandemic, according to its reports. Lester Carlson, the governor's budget director, spoke with Kandit in his effort to dispel rumors that the bank was using the federal funds to increase loans and therefore make money off of loans. Okay.
I called in just to set the record straight that the deposit at the Bank of Guam is not collateralized downstairs, so that you're paying interest, so you have to go out and make loans against it to offset the interest that you're paying.
What does that mean? What does that mean, collateralized downstairs?
So, like, any bank, they have funds on deposit, right? So
yes.
They're paying people, honestly, it's less than 1%, right? But they have an obligation from a business standpoint to be able to lend against deposits, so that they make, say, 6% on the money that they're paying people, 1%. That's just how banking works.
Yeah.
So the caller was basically saying the Bank of Guam benefited by this large deposit, and they're making loans against it. And so I called in just to set the record straight. That's not true. The money isn't downstairs where you get your, mortgage loans and your car loans and your personal loans.
Mm-hmm.
It's upstairs in the trust department. And the money that is there is earning more than it would downstairs, and any earnings go back into the account. And it is not being used for, quote unquote, the benefit of the bank. So that was why I called. And then he also asked why the money wasn't split up between, the other local banks. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, Ray actually, stepped in and said, well, nobody has a banking relationship with the government of Guam other than Bank of Guam. And then Ray stepped in again and said, and by the way, that relationship preceded the governor taking office. So, you can't put that on her. And I believe there's a RFP for banking services that's currently out by DOA. So we'll see whether or not there's any other local interest in providing banking services to Bank of Guam.
Okay. Just if you can help me to follow this. So none of this money, the 320 or whatever it is, right, was sent over to the Federal Reserve?
It's not sent to the Federal Reserve. It's part of the Bank of Guam.
Yeah, no, I understand. But I talked to someone over the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and he explained to me that when banks want to make loans, they have to keep a certain amount with the Federal Reserve.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
But this money isn't subject to that because it's not being collateralized. So that was the whole premise that the caller had. This is not money that is in the loan department or in the bank's reserves to lend against.
Okay, and so that's not happening then.
Yeah. The only thing that the bank is charging, because banking services, as you know, are not free.
No, I understand that part. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's $1,000 a year is what the service charges to be able to hold the money and have it available for us. So it's not something that is being utilized to leverage and enrich the bank. It is actually kept separate away from the amount of monies on deposit available, as the FDIC guy mentioned to you, the Federal Reserve guy. It's not in that realm of that pot of money.
Okay.
And that was by design.
Okay, and that was by design. Got it. Mr. Ekblad from the Federal Reserve confirmed that the more money a bank lends, the more it must place in reserve in the Federal Reserve Bank. But the Bank of Guam has not seen an increase in lending. And despite the decrease in lending activity, it has managed to increase its earnings. The deposits into the bank, according to the senior banker, likely is the reason. In fact, 2021 was a banner year for the bank, with earnings of $17.3 million while loans were shrinking. This year, the bank is in a position to make far greater earnings on its deposits because of the increase in the Federal Reserve interest rate of 3.15%, up from 0.15% last year. In November, according to the bank source, the Federal Reserve is expected to increase the Fed rate again, guaranteeing even more earnings potential for banks. The questions become, where will the bank invest Gov Guam's deposit of the nearly $300 million Ms. Leon Guerrero is saving for the medical campus she wants to build? And if it's true that money currently is not being invested to the benefit of her bank, who's to say that won't change as soon as the election is over? How can the governor and her family divorce themselves from this decision to use federal money to enrich themselves? Congressman Michael Sinicolas, who sits on the U.S. House Financial Services Committee, which has banking oversight, said the ever-growing federal funds interest rate gives the Bank of Guam the opportunity to make millions more from government deposits. By his estimation, if the Bank of Guam parks the balance of federal pandemic funds in an account that earns the federal funds interest rate the Federal Reserve pays to banks, then the Bank of Guam would be making some $9 million annually in interest.
But what the Congress did not do, and what we did not anticipate would be, such a practice today, is they did not anticipate that the banks would continue to sit on that money, that the leadership would sit on that money, and then that $300 million would go and be put into the Federal Reserve System or be invested into U.S. Treasuries. That's what banks do. They hold deposits, they invest it, and then they make even more interest on it.
And what is the interest that's being earned?
Right now, because of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates so high, it's about 3.15%.
It used to be about 1.9.
It's been going up since January.
And 2.5 and now 3.
Right. 3.15. And so when you do the math, simple math, $300 million at 3.15% is over $9 million in bank earnings on that $300 million just by having it, just by sitting on it and putting it into the Federal Reserve. So they're paying out $100,000 in interest or $300,000 in interest on the savings account balance, but they're earning $9 million having that balance sit in the deposit.
And so the question would be that $9 million, say that they've earned in interest while sitting in some Federal Reserve account or some bond market or wherever they may deposit that money. Does that benefit the people of Guam or does it benefit the bank?
It's all bank earnings.
It's all bank earnings.
It's all bank earnings. And so
I could imagine then if Guam has received over $2 billion.
Two entries on the bank's quarterly FFIEC filings show how much money the Bank of Guam places in other depository institutions, to include the Federal Reserve, and how much money it banks in custody and safekeeping accounts. According to another senior banker who spoke to Kandit on condition of anonymity, the custody account entry is where the federal ARPA funds should have been entered, if indeed Mr. Carlson's claim is true that the bank was not using the money to make more money. The difference between the amounts entered in the custody account from the amount entered in the balances due from Federal Reserve entry should then be similar to the unexpended balance of the federal ARPA funds. At the time Mr. Carlson confirmed that the governor's bank was not using the federal ARPA funds to make money, the difference in the balances between the two accounts indeed was around $300 million, the amount the administration is saving in the bank to help build a new hospital. The Bank of Guam FFIEC filings for December 31, 2021, March 30, 2022, and the latest filing on record, June 30 of this year, confirmed Mr. Carlson was telling the truth. In fact, the government's Director of Administration, Ed Byrne, confirmed that while the bank, at least for the period in question, did not make interest from the Federal Reserve on federal ARPA deposits, the government of Guam did make interest from the bank. Quote, "We have accumulated some interest," Mr. Byrne confirmed, about $300,000 that goes back to the ARPA account, unquote. But that's not where the story ends. On June 30, 2022, the Bank of Guam had more than $580 million in the custody account and more than $280 million parked in the Federal Reserve, according to its FFIEC report. That's a difference of nearly $300 million, which jives with the administration's claim, at least for that period. On March 31, 2022, the Bank of Guam had more than $740 million in the custody account and more than $400 million parked in the Federal Reserve, according to its FFIEC report. That's a difference of nearly $340 million, which jives with the administration's claim, at least for that report. On December 31, 2021, the Bank of Guam had more than $800 million in the custody account and nearly $520 million parked in the Federal Reserve, according to its FFIEC report. That's a difference of nearly $290 million, which is close to the administration's claim, at least for that report. But for the two reports prior to that, the numbers tell a different story. On September 30, 2021, the Bank of Guam reported in its FFIEC filing for that quarter that more than $720 million was in the custody account and even more was deposited with the Federal Reserve, more than $760 million, suggesting that the government's federal ARPA balance may have been making money for the bank. The quarterly filing before that, June 30, 2021, shows a similar situation with nearly $800 million in the custody account and more than $750 million parked in the Federal Reserve. Now, there is nothing illegal about this practice. The question is whether the governor or any of her representatives from the government had anything to do with decisions on where to place federal money in a bank where she and her family have the controlling interest. On May 21, 2021, the government of Guam received $553 million in federal discretionary funds resulting from the American Rescue Plan Act. 40 days later, on June 30, 2021, Bank of Guam's FFIEC filing shows a deposit into the Federal Reserve of more than $750 million, a nearly $500 million increase into that account from the previous report of $277 million on March 31, 2021. So, did the Bank of Guam make money off these deposits? Quote, "It should not be in the lendable category," end quote, Mr. Burns said, adding that the Leon Guerrero administration has been clear with the bank that it should not place the federal funds in an account that would allow the bank to make money off of loan interest. He said the postings in those two quarters could simply be a reporting error and that he would need time to verify such. "I did do the due diligence," Burns said, of the Leon Guerrero administration's efforts to prevent any impropriety or even appearance of impropriety. Quote, "If this money is in a trust account, it is with a third party," end quote. At this point in the story, it is important to understand that according to bank filings with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Governor Leon Guerrero and her family own 60% of the shares of the bank, with more than 41% under the control of the governor herself. Control that temporarily is on hiatus while she is the governor. Prior to her assumption of office on January 3, 2019, the governor placed her portion of shares in a trust which she legally cannot steer while she is the governor. A portion of those shares belonged to her husband in joint tenancy. We asked the governor's office for verbal confirmation that neither the governor, the first gentleman, the lieutenant governor, nor any member of her cabinet or staff has ever advised, instructed, or otherwise requested the Bank of Guam to place federal pandemic funds in accounts, i.e. the Federal Reserve, that would allow the bank the opportunity to make money either through interest income or through lending income. The governor's office directed the question to Mr. Byrne. He responded to Kandit in writing. Quote, "The bank's income numbers, while impossible," pardon me, you can read it. The Department of Administration is responsible for carrying out treasury activities for the government of Guam as provided under the laws and regulations of the territory of Guam. We pride ourselves on fair, ethical, transparent, and fiscally sound management of Guam's finances and prudent deposits of funds, Mr. Burns said. He continued, "Department of Administration has full responsibility for decision-making and ensuring where and how ARPA or other federal fund advances are managed." To be clear, no one had given instructions to DOA as to where or how ARPA or any federal fund advance should be invested. DOA followed the law and invested in a fund, which in turn invests in federal obligations. This is considered a safe investment. This investment also provides our government with additional interest revenue that is rolled back into the ARPA fund for program use. DOA is concerned only that capital invested is secure and the resultant income is as high as such as risk-free investment will allow. The fund, Mr. Byrne continues, investment is in question is not invested in Bank of Guam and therefore is not collateralized as a public deposit. Within five days of the receipt of the federal funding, a decision was made to move funds to this investment, which is an independent and risk-free security because of the nature of the underlying fund, U.S. government federal obligations. The bank's income numbers, while impossible to discern from the reports themselves the actual source of income, do show that the bank made money. The quarter following the September 30, 2021 report is when the bank posted its highest total interest income since the pandemic started, more than $82 million. This is the same period the bank posted its highest amount of total equity throughout the pandemic, more than $183 million. This also was the same period the bank was a whisper away from $3 billion in total assets, or 3 times Gov Guam's general fund and nearly all of the island's entire gross domestic product. And this was also the same period the bank paid out the greatest amount of dividends to its stockholders and highest earnings. Kandit asked Bank of Guam whether the governor or her husband have ever influenced decisions at the Bank of Guam since January 2019. We also asked whether they or any person from the governor's cabinet or staff have ever influenced bank decisions on where to place deposits of federal money. The bank has not responded to Kandit's inquiry as of the publication of this story. The bank's quarterly FFIEC report to the FDIC was due September 30, 2022. According to the Central Data Depository, the report has yet to be publicly filed. It is the governor's decision and the governor's decision alone to not expend $300 million in federal funds for the foreseeable future. That decision keeps this money in the bank she owns. How the bank maneuvers its cash deposits and lending portfolio is entirely a private matter and frankly the very nature of business in the banking industry. Kandit asked if Mr. Byrne has allowed us to inspect all public documents at DOA related to the investment account where this money, according to him, has been invested. The results of that inspection will be part of the series of stories under this investigative report. As a note from me as the author of this story, I know the governor's family personally. They are very nice and humble people. They built a bank we as Guamanians should be proud of. Their success is something that shines for us all. The Bank of Guam has hundreds of employees who work hard every day, and that hard work has translated into home ownership and car ownership for so many, loans and lines of credits that have grown businesses and provided for families, and banking services that have helped our government. But alas, evidence of cronyism in the governor's administration, including an audit that called into question the conduct of her former legal counsel over millions of dollars in sole source procurement, call on us as a community to ask the tough questions about the use and abuse of public resources. Hopefully, this first part of our investigative series has brought answers to questions you have had and brings us a step closer to the truth and to accountability in your government. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. God bless you, and good night. I have different goals as I age. I want to be stronger and healthier, but it's got to fit my lifestyle. I can't spend all day in the gym, and it can't be crowded. So here at CrossFit Kita, I have all these different options for fitness, and the people are really nice. The atmosphere is inviting. It's like family. Gov Guam employees and retirees, sign up today for CrossFit Kita for free when you choose Take Care as your insurance carrier, and for 50% off if you choose Select Care. It's an investment you'll love.
Half a day. I'm Tom Fisher. Here's the harsh reality. A trip to the grocery store for the basics, eggs, bag of rice, butter, can of Spam, milk, costs almost $30, and that's just 5 items. The cost of living continues to grow, but the money doesn't. We need to roll back the business privilege tax to reduce Guam's cost of living, and I will make that happen.
Vote Thomas Fisher for senator. If you want different, vote different.
I'm Tom Fisher, and I approve this message.
I'm sick.
I'm tired.
I'm sick and tired of the infiltration of crystal meth in our families and in our neighborhoods, yet no drug task force to stem the flow of drugs is anywhere in sight.
We are disgusted in the increase in violent crimes and the decrease in police officers.
We are outraged at witnessing the absence of leadership and action until 6 months before the election.
We are sick of knowing
that if one of our loved ones gets very sick,
GMH may not be safe enough for them.
We have hope because we see the honesty of Governor Felix Camacho and Senator Tony Atta.
We have faith that they will take care of all the people, including the forgotten.
The struggling.
The in and the out.
In this election, we're voting for values.
For fairness.
For equality and equity.
For leadership that works from day one.
We are voting for Camacho Atta.
I'm Felix Camacho, and I approve this message.
Hafa Day, dear people of Guam. My name is Pete Santos, and I approve this message. I am the only candidate that's running for Attorney General that has the proven track record, the required skills, and the leadership ability to make Guam safe again. Please write me in for Attorney General of Guam this election. Thank you, si Diyos maasi, maraming salamat po, and kireso.